floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. I also just wanted to thank the co-sponsors, Professor Oriens and Tufts, obviously, for having us back on campus. My name is Ari Masevsky, and as I was introduced, for the last couple of years, I've worked for the Arava Institute for Environmental Studies. Just out of curiosity, has anyone in the room been to the Arava Institute? Cool. Cool. When were you there? Okay, so fairly recently. Nice. Nice. Yeah, it's a pretty small community. We're an environmental research institute right on the southern border of Jordan and Israel, about 4 hours driving south of Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, about half an hour north of Eilat, which is the border city between Israel, Jordan, and Egypt. We were founded in 1996 on the premise that environmental issues in the region transcend the politics of the region, that obviously it's a region, it's the Middle East, it's a region with a lot of complicated politics, but when it comes to issues like water resource management, like sustainable development, and sustainable agriculture in the desert, these are renewable energy, these are issues that transcend politics. It doesn't matter if what your religion is, what your race is, where you come from, what your politics are, everybody has to care about the environment first and foremost. So every semester we bring together students, interns, researchers from diverse backgrounds around the region and around the world to study their shared concern for the environment and shared environmental issues, and use that as sort of the linchpin, the tool to bring people together to discuss other things as well. Every semester, about a third of our students come from Jewish Israeli backgrounds in the region. A third of our students come from Arab backgrounds in the region. They're Palestinian, Jordanian, Arab Israeli, sometimes Egyptian and other places. And then a third of our students come from outside the region, which is often a lot of US study abroad students, but we also have students who come from universities and countries in Europe and South America and Africa. Over the course of 22 years, we've had students from 47 different countries, and everybody takes courses in environmental studies, but uses it as an opportunity to get to know each other's backgrounds, each other's perspectives, and really understand the fact that in a region as complicated as ours, there are as many narratives as there are people. So Suleiman Halasah has been at the Arava Institute for a while. He started with us 12 years ago as a student, has worked as a research intern in our Center for Transboundary Water Management, and received his master's degree and is now pursuing his PhD at Ben Gurion University of the Negev, which is the Arava Institute's academic affiliate. He is currently a staff researcher in our Center for Transboundary Water Management while continuing to complete his PhD research. So Suleiman, I'm going to let you take it from here.
Thank you, Ari. Good afternoon, and thank you everyone actually for being here. It's a great pleasure, and I hope this will be interesting enough for you. So I just want to start with this map and ask if anyone is familiar with this. What do you see here? Can anyone say what's there? What do you see? Okay, yeah, water. The Middle East. And how, anything that you recognize here? Okay, yeah. Boundaries, borders, yeah. And who put these borders? Well, some people would say that it was forced on them. Some people would say that they fought for them, whatever. It's like it's a long story, not get there. But what I want to stress is that if we look to the map from a different perspective, then we see that actually it's more complicated. This is the different watersheds and aquifers that exist in that specific area in between the Mediterranean and the Jordan River. And here we see that whatever boundaries we draw doesn't matter. Like water doesn't care about these boundaries. So the problems that we care about, the problems that we created, simply doesn't exist for the environment. It's a different story. We are actually facing and encountering other issues related to the environment that if we stay within our boundaries or with the borders that we put for ourselves, we'll never be able to solve these issues. Especially if we look, for example, here, how does this work? Yeah, if we look here, like this is the one of the streams. I will not call it river because we have a very different definition of what you call a river. So this stream is initiated at the south of the West Bank. You can see here, like this is the small like green hash line. That's the green line between Israel and the West Bank. So it starts over here, crosses to Israel, so the West Bank is upstream, Israel is downstream, and then it crosses actually from Israel to Gaza, and then that, like the opposite, the reverse. Like Israel now is upstream, and Gaza is downstream. It goes all the way to the Mediterranean, and this is like one of the cases that we study, and it's very interesting because the communities, there's a very mix of different communities that living around that watershed, and what's going on there is affecting everyone around it as a transboundary issue. So just to keep in mind what political situation, what political problems we have in the Middle East, and that will lead to looking into one of the case studies and how we actually try to use this problem as an opportunity to bring people together to talk. So if we look into the West Bank, there is lack of infrastructure in general, but mainly wastewater collection and water supply as well, wastewater treatment. There is, in general, lack of funding for anything. There is almost no authority. So there is a Palestinian authority exists, but actually how much power it has is very limited compared to what should be. On the other hand, in Israel, which is one of the leading countries in water treatment, wastewater treatment, agriculture, irrigation, and so we have a leading country that's leading the world in these technologies next to a country, depends what you want to call it, that has big gap or huge lack of these basic services. And then one of the main things is that people or professionals there, when they talk about reality and solutions, they talk very different languages. Like they refer to problems that they don't relate to each other. And that creates, also adds another layer of the problem of solving any transboundary water issue that, both sides, both people are concerned about two different things. And then we have the Oslo Accords, and according to Oslo Accords, there was the forming of Joint Water Commission that supposedly is the commission between the Israel and the Palestinian professionals, meet every now and then, mainly to talk about water-related issues and how to solve these problems. They didn't meet that often. Last time they met was a few months ago, after 10 years of not meeting, and it wasn't a successful meeting a few months ago. Like they wanted to do a big pipeline project, and apparently maybe it seems that it's not happening. But that's not encouraging at all. What was the outcomes of the Accords of Oslo actually is not happening or not being implemented, which makes the situation even harder and more severe. My Palestinian friends would say that the main thing they learned from Oslo is the ABC, the alphabet, because now all what they need to deal with is areas A, B, and C. Do you know what is that? What's the definition of area? Can you say something about it? Like you?
Yeah. But it essentially determines what areas of West Bank are controlled by Israel or by local Palestinian authorities. I don't remember. I know what area it is. I don't remember what each one is, but one of them is that local authority has control over everything. One of them is that there's like local governance, but Israel has like security forces there, and then the other one is full Israeli control.
Exactly. So that's exactly ABC, as you said it. So area A is where most of the Palestinian population are living. That's main cities and towns. Area B is, we can say it's the suburbs or any outskirts of any town, and that's a mix of agricultural land and residential area. And area C is whatever left. And if we look into the map, most of the blue is actually area C, and that's a good percentage of the West Bank. Why this is important for water issues or wastewater? Because when was the last time to see the wastewater treatment plant in your town, in your city? Do you know where it is? Where is it? You said that you know, yeah. And how close is it to the residential area? Yeah, but you cannot walk there. You need to take a care. So usually wastewater treatment plants are preferred to be outside of cities. Nobody wants to have a wastewater treatment plant next to his house. For that, if we relate that to this map, then that means any wastewater treatment plant should be in Area C. And Area C, as you mentioned, is mainly under the Israeli military control. There is lots of regulations and approvals, and it's a very long process to get that permission or to work on that permission if the Joint Water Commission committee is meeting. But we know that they are not meeting, so things get stuck. For some of these wastewater treatment plants that have been planned since the year 2000, 2002, are not implemented yet, and that creates a serious problem because people don't know what to do with their wastewater. The solution for most of these people is mainly using septic tanks, if they care about the environment, if they can actually invest in some money and dig the septic tank underground, which most of the time is not sealed. That means most of the water is actually penetrating to the groundwater and causing water pollution issue and major health risk. And others will just have a pipe that goes to the nearest creek or wadi and have the sewage flow there. So the watershed of the stream I mentioned, which is called the Basur in Israel, and Wadi Samin for the Palestinians in the West Bank, initiates in this area over here, which is south of Hebron, which has the residential, some of the industry, mainly stone cutting and leather tanning. Stone cutting has lots of slurry that contains very fine particles, so the turbidity is very high. And leather tanning includes the use of lots of chemicals, so the water is highly polluted, and their wastewater is highly polluted, and they just dump that in the wadi, which flows across that green line. To add to that, and so that's one side of the problem. It's actually the lack of wastewater treatment, wastewater collection in the West Bank. To add to that, we have several communities in Israel, Bedouin communities. If you've been to Israel, I don't know if you saw around Beersheba, there is lots of what's called unrecognized villages, and that's Bedouin communities that are sitting there, who are not part of the master plan. Like these communities or the establishment of these communities are not part of the master plan for the region. So for the state, they are illegal, but for the people living there, they've been living there for years, decades sometimes. And it's another conflict between the state and the citizens, but these Bedouins are full Israeli citizens, that creates another issue, another problem very similar to what's in the West Bank, that these communities are not getting any of the wastewater services, any municipal services, waste collection or electricity, and they have a water point, and each house has it's supposed to actually connect to that water point, bringing their own pipe and doing it. And that adds to the problem again, because it's still in the watershed. It's in the area that whatever water is being dumped there will go eventually to that stream. So these communities in orange and in yellow here are identified as the Bedouin, unrecognized Bedouin communities in Israel. Also, one other thing to add in the West Bank, which is also creating another tension between the Palestinians and the Israelis, is if you want to install a wastewater treatment plant, then the goal is to serve the maximum number of population, the higher number of population, to get higher efficiency of the system. You will not install a smaller wastewater treatment plant and deal with 20% of the population, then in a few years add another one. So you want to serve everyone at the same time. And in order to do that, there is some settlements that are not connected to any wastewater treatment plant. And by logic, or if we talk about engineering-wise, they are supposed to be connected. But for the Palestinians to approve that, that means they are recognizing the existence of these settlements in the West Bank. And that bring us back to the conflict, to the political conflict. It's like who is there, who should be there, who shouldn't be there, and all these discussions, non-ending discussions that's happening. So for now, what most of these settlements are doing is just, some of them have their own small-scale wastewater treatment plants, and some of them don't. So just do very similar practice to what the Palestinians are doing, and dump the sewage in the creek, which is illegal according to the Israeli law. So in order to be able to work with that, we outreach to these communities and we work with them. The first thing I want you to see is actually how does it look in real life, in the ground. So this photo was taken from the point where that stream is actually crossing from the West Bank to Israel, crossing the green line. And you see how the turbidity of the water, like the water is simply white, grayish. Still, that doesn't prevent this the shepherd from bringing his sheep to drink from that water. And nobody, I think, knows what's actually the impact of that on people who will be consuming what these sheep are producing. And this is on the Palestinian side. At the checkpoint, there is a very simple treatment happening, mainly by settling, that to reduce the turbidity of the water. But at the other side, it doesn't look very different. So the light is not the best, so you cannot see exactly. But the water is a little bit cleaner, but it still smells very bad. And this is next to the Bedouin community, one of the Bedouin communities in the around Beersheba area. A few weeks ago, I showed this photo in a conference in Beersheba, and some people didn't believe that actually this is just outside of their city. Simply, most of the people don't know that actually this is happening. For that specific community, it's called Batin. As I said, they don't have municipal waste or municipal services. So for them, the river can carry anything that they throw in. So they throw their garbage, their construction waste, and all that. Another photo from the same area showing that this is the Bedouin town, and that's the stream passing in. And for us in the Middle East, this is river. So, no insult, no. Okay. So what we did is mainly working with this community and some communities in the West Bank, and trying to introduce something that may have a potential of a solution there. As you heard, the problem is very complex and has not so many players, and it's a large-scale problem. So it cannot be efficiently solved if we work with in a small scale and at the grassroots. But what we believe in is like providing some training and awareness and education for the people can be part of the solution, can give people some understanding of how actually what can be done in order to solve this issue. So we introduced a small system for household or for a farm, and depends on the number of users, starting by separating the wastewater that's generated into black and gray water. Do I need to explain the difference? Black water and gray water? Yeah. So simply black water is almost everything that's coming out of the wastewater pipe of the house. That includes mainly the main component is the human organic waste, and that are coming from toilets. Gray water is anything that doesn't include organic waste, mainly washing from washing machines, from showers, from things that actually it's easier to treat, and mainly it forms around 70% of the amount of wastewater that's coming out of the house. So the idea was to separate that, and most houses actually in the West Bank and also in Jordan do the separation by default for different reasons. One of them, not to overload the septic tank with water, and the other is that they already use the gray water for irrigation without any treatment, the raw gray water for irrigation, which is another health hazard that we are talking about. So For the black water, we introduced a modified septic tank, which is very simple and similar to what they are using, but with additional layers of gravel and filtration, so the retention time will be higher. That will give more time for organic material to decompose, and that will make it having like less impact on the environment. And the other is for treating the gray water that comes out of the house. And in this case, it will have this impact, and the farmer or the household will have if they are already using the gray water, they will have a cleaner gray water to use, or they will have another source for water to use for irrigation. Of course, it comes with all the different trainings of what you can irrigate with gray water and what you cannot, what you can do, and what does it mean to treat the gray water. So we installed different systems in different households and schools, and the idea was mainly educational, mainly to expose these people to some kind of a treatment that they can use, using mainly local material, low cost, and can be done by anyone. So we installed several systems. This is one of them that was still under construction back then. It's in a school in the Bedouin community that I just showed a photo of in Batin. And the system is being used as a demonstration for the science class or for the school kids to learn more about water treatment. And I think it's this is the school principal actually, and he said that actually it has a high value for the school, and they appreciate having the system. And the other one, this is just showing a farm south of Hebron. The farmer has a large family, around 12 people living in that house, meaning that they are consuming lots of water, but also they are producing lots of wastewater. So he was looking for another source of water for irrigation. Now he has it. We had to explain to him in details what he can use the water for in irrigation and what not, and no direct contact between the water and the crop. And we encourage them mainly to use the water for irrigation for trees mainly. So with these systems were installed almost 3 years ago, and like any other project that any NGO would do, we're done with the project, our funding is over, and we moved on. All these projects were actually implemented with the local Palestinian partner, an NGO there. And that NGO kept contact with the local community. They introduced us to the different communities, and they were involved with the local municipalities in choosing which households will host these systems. And 2 years later, we got another project for monitoring the water quality of the gray water actually that's being produced. So we went back to these systems, and surprisingly, we found that some of them, a good percentage of them, is actually not working. And then it was weird. Why does that happen? The system should be very simple and easy, and it doesn't require that much maintenance. So there is something wrong happening there. And that led to another study, which is part of what I'm doing for the PhD, is to look into different communities and see how they adapt or how they use the technology that's being given to them. From the literature, we found out actually that almost 78 to 90% of the systems implemented in the West Bank, mainly for wastewater treatment, fail after 2 years of finishing the fund when the project is done, which is very, very high number. Only 20% of them succeed, and I'm not sure what does it mean to have a successful system in this context. But that led us also to work or to look into the problem from a different, more to look to the larger picture. So what we try to do now is mainly to look to the communities as complex systems. We see the different layers in the community, and what we are trying to do is to find the connections between different components of the community and how they interact with each other. So if we look into, any community will have very different systems interacting with each other and affecting each other. Only by understanding that we can be able to introduce or to understand how actually these projects or how communities interact with these projects. So what we keep in mind whenever we design any of these projects nowadays is that the community is a complex system, first of all, and second, there's always high uncertainty in dealing with the community. There's always lots of variables. So that means there is no ultimate solution. There is no ready-made technology or solution that's actually appropriate for all the problems that we face. For, like, if we talk about grey water treatment systems, we know what is the best technology available. That doesn't mean that it is always the most suitable one to be used in that community. There is lots of interaction happening there. So for that, we adapted a methodology developed by the University of Virginia researchers, and it's mainly working in parallel. So after identifying a community with need for a service, and in this case, we talk about water and sanitation service, we have two main tracks of the assessment of the research. So we need to know what is the community capacity, where the community is standing now, what their ability of doing different things in general. I will go into details in a few minutes. And what is the requirement of the available technologies, or what should we assume that the community knows before we introduce this technology to them. And then we go back to the community. For doing that, actually, the assessment should be done always together with the community themselves. So we have continuous meetings with them, explaining, and that's part of the pre-preparation of the project. We still don't have a project now. We just are exploring what is the current situation and what is the problem and what are the different options to solve these problems together with the community themselves. And after that, we create a selection protocol or a selection method for what is the technology that we'll be using. Then we go back again to the community and discuss that proposal with them and see if they accept it or not, what's going on. And then move on to create the long-term management model that actually the community should be mainly involved and doing. By doing this, as you mentioned, the participatory approach, and that's mainly creating or ensuring that the community sees the ownership of the project, that actually it's coming from them. It wasn't imposed by an expert coming from the outside, telling them, yes, you have a problem, and we are solving this problem for you. This is how you should solve your problem. It's also very much like the way that we do it is to see how these communities are solving the problem currently, what they are doing about that problem. And one of the first options will be is just to improve that, to help them in getting, fine-tune the way that they are doing or improving the way that they are managing that problem. And that can be one of the options available, and we propose that to them. So community capacity is the understanding, or for us, it's giving us the understanding of how this community is able to manage that any specific technology. So it's the different interaction between the components of that community and how that interaction leads to the community to actually create or deal with a certain service. In order to measure that, this is only in words, and engineers don't like words. We need numbers. So we try to represent that or to evaluate, to give a value for this. And in order to do that, we divide or we look into different capacities at the community itself. So the model proposes 8 different capacities. In our study, we use only 5 of them. And the main thing is each one of these capacities represents the ability of that community in dealing, in providing a part of the service itself. So if we talk about human capacity, for example, that means what's the background, the academic background or educational background they have, the people that we are dealing with. If we want to give them a training, does that mean We can just provide them with the written material and the brochure. Can they read? Can they read and write? Or we just need to go in the field and actually do the work with them and show them how it's actually being done. The other thing is energy capacity, and energy capacity mainly, we know if communities doesn't have access to energy, then that creates another problem that we are not directly related to water, but for sure it's part of the problem. If you don't have electricity, you cannot propose a technology that has a water pump, for example, or a filtration system that uses membrane, but you need to have a pressure against it. So all these different capacities will eventually lead to identify the ability of the community in dealing with different technologies. So how do we do that? We simply go to the community with a questionnaire and interview people who are interested. And in this case, we mainly talk about people who already have grey water systems. So it is not a random sample. It is a study based on what's existing. So we got a list of the different households and farms who were provided grey water systems in the last 10 years. And we interviewed them one-to-one. We asked several questions, and each group of these questions will address one of these capacities. Then what we do is mainly rank or give a ranking, a score for each one of these questions. And some questions are more important than the others, so they will have a higher weight than the other questions, but then that will give us the community, the capacity factor for that specific capacity component. And then, based on that, we will have capacity factor for each one of these capacities. What we use is the weakest link approach, meaning that the lowest capacity factor is the most urgent one and that we should address first. And for that, we just take the minimum out, the minimum number of these capacities. So that capacity, for example, we found that the energy capacity of that community is the lowest. Then we start finding a solution for the energy before addressing the water issue that they have, because without securing the energy, we cannot do anything else. Then we, according to the capacity assessment or the minimum score, we rank or that community according to community development level. Then we will have a number that actually represents that community, and then great, we have a number now. Let's work. Let's do it. Let's do the job. So again, that's one side of the process. We are here. In order to be able to move on, we need to have a similar ranking or a similar number from the technology. We need to know what's the requirement of that technology. Well, and that's usually done separately, not at the same time. We should prepare a list of the different technology that matches that service and rank these technologies according to their requirements. And also we need to get to a number. What does it mean? That this technology is more complex than the other? It's like how this technology is the highest complex. This is lower complex. This is not a number. If we tell an engineer that, they will not accept it. They need to see number again. For this, we work with a ranking or scoring system or scoring scheme for the technologies. So what we do, prepare a list of the different technologies available. Sometimes depends on the scale that we are working on. Here we talk about small scale, only households. So we don't break the technologies into different stages. Usually what we do is like for grey water, there is collection, treatment, or collection, transport, treatment, and then disposal. For the household, it's all one unit, so we didn't break it down into that. If we did the breakdown, then we actually can have build different options, group the options as operational units, and then propose different scenarios of like we can take one component of this technology, add it to a different component, depends on what's more appropriate for in general for that community. But in this case, we only calculated the technology score based on 4 criteria. And to do that, we have the 4 criteria: that cost, energy, technology, and institutional. And each one of them, we look into the technology and see how much does it cost, or to build that specific system, how much energy, how much money the community should spend, or the homeowner should spend in order to get it. What operation and maintenance is required, and what's the cost of that. And we just give it a score based on 1 point, 5 points, 10 points. And this is arbitrary. It can be different scale. You decide. And based on these different criteria, we come up with a ranking for our score for that technology that, in this case, is between 0 and 1, and the community score is between 1 and 100. It's easy to convert. But then we'll get, for each one of these technologies that we have in the list, a score. And that score represents what is the community level that the community should be at in order to be able to deal with this technology. Then we do the matching. As we have 2 numbers, we see where they match, and that's it. We get to that the final result, where we go back again to the community and work with them, propose that solution, and see if there is anything that we missed in this equation. If there is maybe sometimes some cultural issues that can raise by the discussion, that means that this technology is not appropriate. So then we need to go back and give another proposal. And based on that, we just implement and go on. So so far we've finished in this research. We did the first stage, which is the community assessment. Now still we have some students who are looking into the different options of the grey water treatment system and trying to give the technology requirement level of these technologies. So I have some results to share, mainly about the community capacity of the communities that we looked into. And this is still not published, so please, I saw that some people are taking photos. It's fine, but I didn't publish this yet, so I need to graduate, please. So, so we went back to these communities, and we identified more than 100 systems, more than 100 households, and we built the questionnaire to cover as much as possible of each of the capacity factors. And each capacity factor has different components. And these components, the score of these components, will give the overall score for that capacity factor. And what if you look here, that there is lots of overlaps between the different ones, especially if we talk about human capacity or technical capacity. They are usually related. The technical capacity is mainly provided by the HR, or the human resources the community is having. But then we give a different weight for the component itself to focus on that capacity, not to have the same score for the 2 capacity factors. So we went to the community and asked all these questions. It was a very long questionnaire, around 90 questions. They were very nice to give us enough time to go through the question. Each interview was around 1 hour. The fact that they're actually willing to contribute or to be part of this study means also that they are engaged and they are interested in what we are doing, and they see a potential there. So some of the results. This is only a result for 78 systems, not the 100 systems. And they are all over the north of the West Bank mainly. We try to divide them into urban and rural areas, and to see if there is any difference actually in the capacity, what's the ability of them. The red dot shows that actually the system is not working. The blue, that the system is working. And here I just want to mention that the definition of working doesn't mean that actually the quality of the grey water produced is good. It only means that there is water coming into the system and going out from the other side. In this study, we didn't evaluate the the quality of the gray water being produced. There's another study that's going on with longer, as I mentioned, that's what triggered the whole thing, that we get the funding for long-term monitoring of the water quality. And that's a different study being done by a different PhD student. What we noticed is only 50% or 51% of the systems are working. If we look to the literature, this is great. It's more than 20%, so we should be happy. But still, you know, this is not a random sample. It's a sample of people who were approached by different NGOs and were identified by the local municipality who should know what actually the system is. So why the success rate is low or the failure rate is still kind of high. But then when we asked them if they would recommend the system to someone else, we had a very different result. Almost all of them, 90% of them said yes, they would recommend having a system to their neighbor or to their relative or anyone that they know. And that actually shows that they understand the importance of these systems. They understand that actually there is, they get something in return. There is a new water source that they are using. Some of them said also that they care about the environment, and this is good because it's helping the environment in reducing their impact on the environment. But it's very interesting result that still 50% of them, or like half of the people that would, in a way, would recommend the system to others, have a system that's not working. So that's interesting to know. Another thing was also when we look to their financial situation, and again, this is the West Bank, a developing community. Still, one of the main challenges they are having is the economical level, socioeconomic level, and all that. So we saw that the majority of them spend 100% of their income on their monthly expenditures. So whatever they make for that month goes to cover their needs for that month, their kids' education, the water, the electricity, the rent, sometimes transportation, medical, healthcare, or like so. They don't have the ability or the potential in saving money, first of all, and also allocate some money for something else that they can use afterwards. But when we ask them if they are willing to contribute to the, I think with this one, initial cost of the system, we get a different result. Some of them actually want to invest a percentage of their income in having these systems, which again shows that there is interest in that. How satisfied they were? Almost very close number to the success rates over there. The overall scoring afterwards was also interesting, but also that explained a lot of these contradiction of the results. We saw that for sure that the financial capacity, that wasn't a surprise at all, that it's the weakest. Energy was quite high, and actually it is only low here because I didn't give lower weight for having a backup source of energy. If I did that, then this will be in the 90s, and this is the percentage out of 100. So if we don't look into having an alternative energy source, then this will be almost like in the range between 90 and 100% for most of these communities. The other interesting thing was that the difference between rural and urban was very minimum. And again, this is, I would say, mainly because the selection of the sample is not statistical, so it doesn't actually represent the differences between the two settings or the two lifestyles. And then the institutional capacity was the lowest, which means there is no entity, no institution within that community that actually is responsible for taking care of that system. In one hand, in the other hand, also shows that these farmers or household owners, they don't feel that they own these systems. Whenever, like, they always refer to the NGO or the organization that provided the system for them. So they don't see it as their system. They see that the system that was given to them. So that's one of the main issues that we need to work on. And the other is when we ask them, like, did you have any problems with your system? They said yes. So who did you contact to solve the problem? And they said they didn't have anyone to contact, which means there is no follow-up. These NGOs come, install these systems, and then disappear. For some of them, actually, the homeowners only saw the people working at that NGO on the day of installation of the system, and that's it. This leads us to actually the next step of the study after finishing this assessment, the whole assessment, is what type of governance and long-term monitoring and operation for these systems should be introduced. So we'll be working with the local community in a little bit north of Jericho. It's called Auja. It's a farming community that we've been working with them for almost 8 years now, and introducing different technologies, different systems for grey water treatment, for wastewater treatment, for solar water pumping, and all these different technologies. So what we will do is now we have very good information or data collected by that or about that community. We will try to come up with a governance model and propose it over there and see actually how it goes. Some of these projects that we implemented there has a potential for generating, or not generating, actually saving money for the farmers. If we talk about solar water pumping, that actually it is offsetting their consumption of electricity. So that means they pay less, and then meaning that if they allocated $1,000 per month for their electricity bill, now they are allocating $600. So there is a difference of $400 that has the potential of actually being invested in something else. And what we propose is that something else should be this management and operation institute that will help the community. Actually, it will be part of the community. The community members will be the ones who are running it. There will be some training for technicians that will be doing it. And so still in progress. We hopefully by June, this study will be over, and we'll have more results to show. So again, going back to the community and working with that, but that's it here. Thank you very much. So if you have any discussions, questions.
One of the things
You don't have, it's for the people online.
got it. One of the things you mentioned was that there's not a lot of follow-up once the systems are installed by the NGOs. Is this something that people are working on now, or is this just an idea that's floating out there that needs to be worked on?
It needs to be worked on. I think it is one of the negative sides of the NGOs world that, most of the NGOs are always looking for funding for new projects in order to survive. So unfortunately, if we talk about the funding agency side, their reporting or requirements mainly don't require that long term, and it's not part of the funding to start with. That there is no, when you build the budget for that project, there is no item that shows monitoring or following up after the project is over. And that I think this will, the recommendations here should also go to the funding agencies to tell, this needs to be changed. We need to have long-term, in order to make sure that there is long-term sustainability, we need to have long-term monitoring and evaluation and going back to keep the relationship with the communities and as long as it's possible. What we try to do here is also, like I mentioned, that we work on the current ability or capacity of the community, and then we introduce what's the appropriate technology. But what I missed to say is that what if this technology is not the best available in the market? So then what we try to do is to keep working with the community, provide the training in order to fill the gap between their current situation and what's the desired situation, let's say in 5 years. That will also be only be a recommendation because of how fundings are being managed now, and hopefully that will change the way that these projects being implemented in the future. So it will be added as a component.
Is this something, this funding problem, which I think is pretty universal across all not-for-profits everywhere in the world, is this something that you think needs to be fixed on the funder side, or can the grant writers make a difference here?
I think it's both. They need to work together on that. Like if the funding agency doesn't see there's a need for that, which should be reflected by the grant writer and by the implementing organization as well. If they don't get that feedback, then it will not trigger any change. So in order to create the change, they should be also work together. And that's a different level of communication that we talk about here. Yeah, I'm hoping that it will be easy. Yeah. Yeah.
So thank you so much for coming. It was a wonderful talk. I was curious a little bit about the case of Lebanon, which has seen an influx of Syrian refugees and also Palestinian refugees that place a lot of strain on Lebanon's wastewater treatment system, and whether you think the Lebanese model of action is better or if it faces the same difficulties, just like the overall state of wastewater treatment in Lebanon, because they have also commissioned the construction of a bunch of new treatment facilities, but they run into the same problems, they break down. So are they using a more adaptable model, or what's the relationship, if there is any?
Thank you. It's a very important question, and actually, as you may know, and like I think it's already all the time in the news and in the media, the refugee situation in the Middle East. So Lebanon received a large number of refugees. Jordan has around 20% of its population as refugees, Syrian refugees mainly, and it's a situation that's not good for any country, for any community to have this sudden change in the population. But we need to make a distinguish or a difference there are two different responses or like I would say there are two main schemes or work schemes. One of them is the development that we are doing, which is community development, which is a longer term, and we have the luxury of time to work on that together with the community. And there is the disaster response or the relief, I would call it, which should be immediate, and it's different. So it's a very different way of looking to these projects and different way of implementing them. I don't think that you can use a community development approach in order to address disasters.
We have a question from someone online.
Thank you for the detailed and comprehensive presentation. You mentioned in the beginning that there are large-scale and small-scale or grassroots approaches to address the water issues in the region.
Mm-hmm.
This project would probably fall under the small-scale side. What are some thoughts that you have regarding large-scale approaches or starting points?
So I would give an example of large-scale, meaning regional. It's not in the wastewater sector, it's mainly in the water, and that's the water exchange agreement between Jordan and Israel that happened in the last 2 years. So in the last decades, people in the Middle East were talking about the Red Sea, Dead Sea Canal, or as some people will talk about it as a way to solve the dropping level of the water at the Dead Sea. And some people now talk about it as a solution for the water scarcity in the Middle East, mainly in Jordan. The project is huge and it requires lots of infrastructure. I'm not the best one to talk about the numbers in this project, but it's a multi-billion-dollar project that requires a very long pipeline that should go from for around 300 kilometers in order to provide the fresh water to where actually it's needed, the drinking water. And by just thinking out of the box, the agreement was, just based on what existing structure is there, and only because the peace treaty exists between Jordan and Israel, this option became an option, was put in the table. So the solution, instead of building all this infrastructure that will cost lots of money, to use what's existing, meaning that, okay, there will be building a desalination plant in Aqaba, city of Aqaba, that's south of Jordan, where the Red Sea is, and most of that water will be, the desalinated water will be sold to Israel for the development in the south that also needs a pipeline for drinking water that comes for another 300 kilometers. And in return, Jordan will buy the same amount of water with different quality for a different price from the north, from the Kinneret, where it used to be the main reservoir for Israel, but now with all the desalination happening at the Mediterranean, then there is a surplus of water at the Kinneret, or theoretically. And after the peace treaty, an infrastructure was built there to get Jordan's share of the Jordan River and the Kinneret anyway. So the infrastructure is there. It's close to where the water needs to be transported. And this is it's an interdependency. Both countries depend on each other, and they understand that I cannot stop providing the water because the other side will not give me the water in return. So this size of project is mega project, and it's a large scale, and we talk here about regional, not even country-wise.
I think we should stop there, but I think this talk brilliantly illustrates why solutions require both a human element and a sort of a data, engineering, science, policy. It's the whole 9 yards. It's environmental studies at its core. And thank you for introducing us. So let's thank Suleiman one more time for his presentation.
Thank you very much. Thank you.